What's happening? Well, we're kind of back doing some maintenance on the Tahoe, so we're going to wrap up that 100,000 mile service. We wrapped that thing up, I don't know, 2-3 months ago when we did the transmission fluid filter and full fluid change. Our total for everything that we did was $495.06. Now I called a couple dealerships, I called a couple shops, and I even use the software I have at my shop to get some rough numbers as to what this would have costed. Long story short, we ended up saving close to $900 doing the 100,000 mile service ourselves. You know what I mean? And that's pretty awesome. I can't remember what the interval was for checking the brakes on the Tahoe, but we're just going to go ahead and do it now. It's not going to be included in the 100,000 mile service. I just want to know where we stand on the brakes. So we're going to check the brakes on this thing, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more stuff about the 100,000 mile service. Alright, what's good? Well, today we're going to do a brake inspection on my 2004 Tahoe. Pretty much just going to remove the wheels. We're going to measure the brake pad thickness and the rotor thickness, and also identify any possible problems. The number one reason, I guess, for checking brakes is there's a problem, whether there's a noise when you hit the brake pedal, or maybe you feel a pulsation when you're pressing the brake pedal down. Pulsation meaning you kind of feel like a jerkiness going on. The number two reason would be kind of what we're doing here today. I just want to know where I stand, as far as the brakes on this thing. I've had this truck for about a year. I've never had the wheels off. I don't have any idea what's going on in there, but I do know that there are no problems. For me, the number three reason for checking the brakes would be to verify a repair. Like maybe I put a caliper and rotors on something and I just want to come back a week later and make sure everything's cool. Well, that would be another reason for checking the brakes. But all we're doing today, like I said, I just want to know where I stand, you know what I mean? So let's do it. So I kind of made myself a little sheet here, and this is pretty much how it goes. We've got left front, right rear, left rear wheel. And then for each of them, we got a spot for the thickness of the inboard pad as well as the outboard pad, a thickness for the rotor, and then we'll come back, we'll look up the spec, and then a little space right here just for any notes I might have if I see something kind of fucked up or whatever, you know what I mean? I'm only going to show you one front wheel and one rear wheel because it's the exact same on the other side, you know what I mean? Now when I did my brake tools video, I talked about this motherfucker right here, just a manual micrometer, but kind of upgraded since then. Got something a little digital. We've also got one of the worst tools ever invented, which is this brake pad thickness measuring tool. I don't know if that's the technical word for it. The reason why this is like one of the worst tools invented is because these colors should be different. This is like a scare tactic, you know what I'm saying? Oh, green, you're okay. Yellow, oh shit. Red, you're fucked. You know what I mean? This is bullshit. It should be green, 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 yellow, red. That's just my opinion. Alright, so we're going to go ahead, measure this front rotor, zero this bitch in. Looks like we got enough room right there just to come up in there. It's like 1.137. 1.137. Now some people will go ahead and they measure the rotor in a couple different spots, you know what I mean? 1.137. Now really we could unbolt this caliper and flip it up and then get a good visual inspection on the pads, but we really don't need to. So these two ears right here are the backing plate of the pads. And then if I spin the rotor, look right there. You can kind of see where the rotor is. So down in between where the rotor is and this thing right here is the brake pad lining. So I can just go ahead and take this motherfucker, put it to whatever. I mean, he fits in there pretty good, and that's 6 millimeters, about 6 millimeters. We can even come up on the top right here. It might be a little bit tough to see because of the light, but 6 millimeters, 6 millimeters. We even got this little window on the caliper, 6 millimeters. We can't do that on the outboard pad, but whatever. Whatever side the caliper mounting bolts are on, whatever pad is on this side, that's going to be your inboard pad. Whatever side's closest to the actual wheel and the wheel studs, that's the outboard pad. So we know we're at 6 millimeters, 6 millimeter. Now we can also look for anything out of the ordinary. We can look at these boots. Make sure they're not fucked up. Just look for anything, you know, out of the ordinary. One thing I noticed is it has these factory retainers on. They just put these on at the factory to hold the rotor on during assembly. Since they've never been off, I don't think this rotor's ever been replaced. I think it's the original rotor. Everything looks good on the right front at least. I'm gonna do the same thing over on the left front, get my specs down, then we'll be back on the rear. Well, we're not gonna be as lucky on the back here. I mean, here we've got this dust shield that goes all the way around the back side of the rotor, except where the caliper is. We've got the caliper brackets in the way. So really, to check this one, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pop this caliper off. These caliper bolts, 12 millimeter. And you can see how the whole slide's turning as I'm turning the bolt right here. You just take a 16 mil. That'll hold them steady. Just set him out of the way. Now we can get a really good look at what we've got going on in here. Well, you can tell this brake pad's fucked. This is what I was talking about earlier. This back piece is the backing plate, and this little piece up here, this is the actual friction material. Motherfucker's at 2 millimeters. And that's going to be on our outboard pad. Remember, it's toward the studs, so it's our outboard pad. On our inboard, it's just a tit hair under 3. So we're just going to round that up to 3. So we've got 2 on the outboard, 3 on the inboard. We can get this, take this pad out of here. Don't drop him. 1.185. Now, just looking at this brake pad right here, I already know straight up this thing's going to need pads. You know what I'm saying? Now, attached to this plate, there's this little tabby right here. That's the little squealer. And what happens is when this pad wears down low enough, this squealer starts touching the rotor. So you get a noise, something to alert you that, hey, you're going to need your brakes looked at soon. You know what I mean? And man, I'm telling you, we are so freaking close to that thing hitting that. Again, I don't have any trouble with this truck. No noise, no nothing. And I was able to catch a potential problem. Since we've got it apart this far, I mean, we can make sure that our slides are good and free. You know what I'm saying? Make sure all our hardware is intact. I think this is the original rotor from 2004. You can tell it's got these clips on here from the assembly line. And this is also another good point. You can see on here, it says min THK, meaning minimum thickness, 28.5 millimeters. That might come into play later, so just remember that number, 28.5. I've got all my measurements. I gave it a good look over just to check for any potential problems. And even though I know I need brakes, I really wasn't prepared to put brakes on this thing today, so we're going to save that for another time. Go ahead and put the wheels back on, and then we've got some other brake stuff to talk about. Alright, so let's just go over the numbers we got. On our left front wheel, our inboard and outboard pads are right around 6 millimeters. That's cool. Even though according to this thing, I should be very cautionary now because I'm in the yellow. Holy shit, I need fucking brakes. Not really, fuck that. Our rotor measured out to be 1.140. Now under here I've got the specs for the front rotors. This first number, 1.102, is what they consider the minimum machining thickness. Like if you were going to turn on a lathe, that's about as far low as you can go. This second number, 1.083, means that the rotor is considered no good. We're well above that, so nothing to worry about there. 1.137. Minimum machining will be 1.102. We're good there. 6 and 6 for our pad thickness, no problem. Our front brakes are good. Now coming to the rear, 4 and 4 on the left rear. That's pretty good, even though, you know, according to this thing, I should be fucking super panicky because, oh my God, I'm so close. I'm one step away from the red. Look. There's 4. Then I'm in the red. Fuck me. We got 1.184 on that left rear rotor spec. 1.142. And our discard 1.122. Over here we've got an issue. Our outboard pad's down to 2, which definitely meets my criteria for needing brakes. Inboard pad was a tiddly under 3, so I'm not really worried about that. Our rotor was also good. We don't have any real scratching or anything fucked up in there, so we're actually going to be able to, you know, salvage these rotors and just put pads on the rear. And that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. The way that the specifications for the brakes was laid out, it went by one of the RPO codes that's in the glove box on the sticker. So what it had here is if you had JH2, JC3, or JC4, you would follow the specs that I already put up here. If you had JH6, you would follow these specs, and these are only the minimums, not the discards. But I'm only putting this in here for JH6 because if you were to do what we just did, and you got something like, you know, 1.4 something, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, Mayo 3 said that this is what the spec was. I think that would be more for like the 2500 versions of, you know, the Suburban or whatever, because it kind of groups all the GMT 800s like this together, so it's like Tahoe, Yukon, Silverado, Escalade, Avalanche, all that shit was kind of like grouped into one, you know, specification thing. If you remember, we looked at the rear rotor, and for, you know, minimum thickness it said 28.5 millimeters. Well, that, if you do the math, 28.5 millimeters is 1.122 inches. So what was actually cast onto the rear rotor actually matched what was in the specification book. But you can't really trust the specification book 100%. There's been times where the actual number that was stamped on the rotor didn't match this in a lot of cars, you know what I'm saying? We're going to be putting rear pads on there, and, you know, that's pretty much it. So it doesn't really matter if you're doing this on the driveway with hand tools, or you're doing it here in the shop with, you know, a lift and air tools or whatever. The same, it's going to pretty much be the same thing, you know what I mean? Gonna start the lug nuts by hand. Just a couple turns, make sure the shit's not going to cross thread. Nothing crazy. That'd be no different than if we were doing it at home and just going over it with a little 1/2-inch ratchet, just snugging everything down, and then drop the truck. So the actual spec, 140 foot-pounds. And then what I do is I just go over it one more time. Just to make sure I got them all. And my personal preference, this is how I put those little stupid plastic caps on here, you know what I mean? I found that just a little tiny ratchet, 7/8 socket, no big deal. So this definitely doesn't really fall into the 100,000 mile service. Like I said, I'm just doing it to see where I stand. These rotors I should be able to salvage, no problem. So we'll get into that coming up. Really, we're still catching up on stuff on the Tahoe. Since I got it here today, we're going to do the greasing the front end and some other little piddly things I wanted to do. But the more Tahoe videos are coming. So if you like them, maybe you just bought a Tahoe, subscribe. Oh yeah. There is more, because I still have more stuff to talk about for the 100,000 mile service. Thanks for watching. You like what you see, subscribe to my shit. If you didn't like it, I don't give a fuck. Isn't it fucking obvious? It's funny that, you know, service advisors are adding stuff, you know, that aren't necessarily part of the service. One place said, oh, you don't have to do the differentials on your truck. Whatever. Their bill was still over $1,400, you know what I mean? In between the time that we did the transmission service and the fluid and all that shit, I think that was like August. I might be wrong, but I think it was August. 2 months later, I went and cruised the internet, to see what other people were saying to do as far as the 100,000 mile service on the Tahoe. So we're going to check out what some great form advisors had to say. Now again, all these threads were started by just regular people. You know, they have 100,000 miles, they don't know the history of nothing, and these are some of the answers from these great form advisors. Filters and chemicals. That was a 3-word answer from somebody on a forum. Filters and chemicals. I don't even know what that would mean. I mean, when you look at what we did over the past year on this thing and filters and chemicals, you'd be like, well, the fuck's wrong with this dude? Another great answer was, for the 100,000 mile service, do not touch trans fluid. And that was in all capital letters. This was another forum post I saw somewhere. Do not touch the trans fluid. Well, I touched the trans fluid and the filter, and you know, here 2 months later or whatever, everything's still tight. So I don't know what this guy was talking about. Here's another great form answer. K&N filter for better mileage. Ooh, shit. I didn't know that was part of the 100,000 mile service. He must be reading a different manual than me. Fuck out of here with your K&N bullshit. Add a drain plug to the transmission. That's actually pretty damn good. Now, this Tahoe does have a drain plug on the transmission, so there may be a difference between shallow pan, deep pan, or whatever, but that was actually a pretty good recommendation, even though that was his answer to what should he do for the 100,000 mile service, so whatever. And another one, they wanted you to clean the mass airflow sensor. I don't know why you would do that without a drivability problem, or why you would do that as part of maintenance, but whatever. Another one on a forum said, at 100,000 miles, you should put in a Corvette servo. Another post said, replace all U-joints. I don't know. I really looked for stuff to back up that claim. Like maybe these trucks are well known for eating up U-joints at 100,000 miles, but I didn't really see any evidence to kind of support that. So I guess that dude's just a pretendo too. And last but not least, best one was, replace all brake pads and rotors. Wouldn't you want to just check the brakes first? What are you doing, Mr. Cricket? You just gonna? Is somebody seriously gonna read a post that says replace brakes at 100,000 mile service and go out and do it? Well, I'm sure as fuck not doing it. That's why I went and checked the brakes on this thing. I get being proactive and keeping up on stuff, but pads and rotors on this, if you weren't doing it yourself, could easily run you $600-700 depending on where you go. Even do it yourself, you'd probably be, I don't know, touch around $350, maybe $400. I don't know, depending on what quality shit you went with. So really, the only thing I can do is just sit back and laugh, you know what I mean, and feel sorry for the people that are seeking this information. All I know is fuck what these forum advisors and these service advisors say. I followed the book. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. I would just, if I paid $1,400 for a really big service done on the truck, and some things that were in the book weren't done, but other things that weren't in the book were done, I would kind of question that, you know what I mean? It just seems like shady, you know what I'm saying? I mean, back at the good old days at the dealer, people that bought their cars from the dealer tended to keep up on their maintenance and shit like that, and I was the guy that would just go by the book, You're due for your 60,000 mile service. Well, if it only calls for 3 or 4 things, that's all it's getting. At the same time, there'd be other guys that would, add these extra bullshit services on there. I mean, a brake flush. I mean, that really didn't even exist before YouTube. Outside of somebody accidentally pouring the wrong fluid into the master cylinder reservoir, I've rarely done a brake flush, especially for a non-existent problem, you know what I mean? Power steering flush, maybe if the pump's making noise and in a last-ditch effort to avoid replacing the pump, maybe it would be worth, changing out the power steering fluid, but it doesn't make any fucking sense. And then the whole thing where they don't even want to replace the transmission filter in this truck, like why? There's a filter. The book says you have to replace it. It's not negotiable. I don't know where these clowns come off thinking that they can just, pick and choose what what they're going to sell to you. It doesn't make any sense. This is just my opinion right here. I think it's easier for them to hook up the trans flush machine and walk away than it is for them to actually You saw what we did when we changed the filter on this thing. You had to move that bracket and shit out of the way and do all that. It took a little bit more time or whatever. I just think that it's more about the quick buck than, you know, doing it the right way. Where the fuck can you go for good advice? You can't get good advice from your dealer. You can't get good advice from your independent guy. You can't get good advice anywhere on the forum. I mean, it just sucks. I feel bad for Tahoe owners, you know what I mean? A couple guys on the Trailblazer forum, you know, they've modified the 100,000 mile service to include things that are kind of known to fail, you know what I mean, at a right around that specific mileage. So it's not uncommon for somebody on the forum to say, at least for the i6 Trailblazer, we recommend, you know, banging in a new upstream O2 or even a cam sensor or anything that we might have seen, you know, repeatedly enough over the years that failed at an early enough mileage to say, you know, you might want to consider adding this stuff in, you know, with your 100,000 mile service. And you could take any one of those things that you find on the forum and you can find supporting evidence for it. You can find other threads, posts, you know, on our awesome site and then that other sorry sucker site. You know, the information's there going back a long time. Like I said, when I was looking at this Tahoe stuff, I couldn't find anything to, you know, back that up. I couldn't find anybody that said, you know, ever since I cleaned my mass airflow at 100,000 miles, my truck has been so much better. I didn't see any of that. You know what I mean? I mean, really, now, if you think about it, you've got service advisors in real life and forum advisors on the internet both telling you not to do the transmission filter change. I think that whoever invented that transmission probably put that filter in there for a reason, you know what I mean? I really don't care that, you know, the people on the Tahoe and Yukon or whatever forums, they're not sharing any of of my information. I really don't care, and I'm not going to go and make a fake account and say, oh, look at this guy's videos, he does a good work or whatever. I mean, that's just stupid, you know what I mean? The videos are titled for people to type in those phrases and get that information. So I really don't think I have to stoop to the level of some fucking assholes and, you know, like I said, join your forum and pretend that, you know, guys, I'm part of your community, and I just keep sticking you with videos till I get banned or nobody cares anymore. That's just fucking stupid. Don't even get me started on that shit. Yeah, I came in tonight because the oil change thing came on this for the oil life monitor, and I realized that it actually, you know, we're coming up on a year since we've had this thing, and, you know, it's kind of like I said, we kind of spread out the 100,000 mile service to make it, you know, affordable. So yeah, I really wanted to wrap up that 100,000 mile stuff and talk about these advisors, because I don't know, I wouldn't want their advice on, you know, I can't even think of a good analogy. I think that was part of the deal. We were going to check the brakes, we were going to check the belts, and we were going to do the suspension lube. And I think that's all really that's left. I'm still saving up to get a fuel pump for this thing. I priced out the Bosch one. It's close to $300, but Bosch has proven itself to me time and time again. So honestly, I don't mind spending the extra money. And I think once that's done, provided this thing doesn't need anything with the brakes, she should be good to go for 16, you know what I mean? That means probably the only thing you might do all year is probably just change the oil. You know what I'm saying? So that wraps it up for the 100,000 mile service. And if I have any more comments from the brake video, which I probably will, I'll probably put them here. I know it's weird that I'm combining two videos into one, but I don't want to make a video called the 100,000 mile service closing remarks. That's fucking stupid. So I'll just incorporate it all together. And if you don't like it, you can go fly yourself. See ya.